name's Andy Pollard. I'm the Senior EPA Delivery Manager here at Pearson. And joining me on this webinar today is Raman Gunane, who is the Portfolio Manager for Healthcare and Childcare. So we are going to be recording this session. So after the event, a copy of the recording will be made available. And as we go through, there are opportunities for you to interact with us, ask any questions, but please do use the chat box, which is on the right-hand side of your control bar. And towards the end, we will be looking at the questions, and the ones that we can't answer immediately, we'll be taking them away, creating a FAQ document, and then that will be shared with you alongside the recording. So if I just hand over to Raman now.
Thank you, Andy. Welcome, everyone. So the aim of today's session is basically to talk about the new qualifications, the full pharmacy offer that we have at Pearson, looking at the qualification and EPA structures and what the curriculum includes, and the assessment principles and the assessment guidance for both on-program qualification and the different components of the qualification. What are the approval requirements and the quality assurance requirements? What resources and support we have available for you for both qualification and endpoint assessments, the whole endpoint assessment process and journey with Pearson, and how you can support your learners with it and what you can do. And also, it's an ideal opportunity for us and you to share the good practice of your experiences and how you currently support the learner journey and what we can do further to support you in that process. So our offer is, to start with, I'm pretty sure most of you know, but I'm going to go through this just in case people still don't know, although it has been communicated widely. Just to give you a bit of a background for the development. So I think it was almost 2 years ago that we started the level 3 development with Skills for Health and Health Education England and Health Education Wales and the other awarding organisations and providers who were involved in it with the level 3 development. So level 3 pharmacy technician qualification, a hybrid qualification new, came into operation this February 2020. So that has been available. However, the apprenticeship standard was written kind of alongside while that qualification was being developed, but it wasn't going to include a mandated qualification. It was going to be an integrated qualification, so or integrated assessment standard and integrated assessment plan. So hence a second version of the qualification needed developing, which included that similar as well as included the EPA. And while we were having these conversations, it was very clear that level 2 apprenticeship standard was kind of providing challenge in some areas of the pharmacy sectors. So the stakeholders kind of were looking for a qualification that was a lot more flexible, that can support the learners in all the areas of pharmacy sectors, hence that demand for level 2. And we developed the level 2 qualification, which is now came into force from operation. So just the background of why the level 3 qualifications changed. And alongside this, I'm sure you already know, the General Pharmaceutical Council changed their criteria. So the IET criteria, I think, came into force in 2017 almost. And so for level 3, as well as the level 2 criteria came into force this year, early this year in February. So that level 2 qualification needed to meet that new criteria, and the level 3 qualification needed to meet the IET pharmacy technician criteria as the pharmacy technicians became regulated. So for all of those reasons, the new qualifications meet the GPHC requirements and the apprenticeship standards as well. So on offer, we currently have the level 2 certificate in principles and practice for pharmacy support staff. So this is the non-apprenticeship version, which has got the guided learning hours for 150. It has got 4 mandatory units and 4 optional units. And this is available in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And as I said, the operational start date is 1st September 2020. The other qualification also has got the operational start date as 1st September, but it's offered only in England because it meets the apprenticeship standard, and it is very much aligned to the apprenticeship standard. Hence, it is slightly larger size because it needed to meet all of those apprenticeship knowledge, skills and behaviors. So it has 6 mandatory units and 2 additional units. Now, we kept those 2 additional units within this qualification for the reason that if a learner's role within the apprenticeship even kind of covered the additional, and if the employer felt that they would benefit, they could do those 2 units as well. So although the apprenticeship standard was met by the 6 units, so that was kind of again in consultation with the customers and the stakeholders. So that's the structure and the offer for the level 2 that we currently have. So the pharmacy service assistant endpoint assessment, again, there is a very strict order of the assessment, the way it has to happen. So it has to have a component 1, the knowledge test has to happen first. So it's been mentioned in that way. And then the component 2 is a simulated observation, and component 3 is a professional discussion. I'm sure you've already seen the assessment plan, but I'm just going through this. So the knowledge test is 90 minutes. It includes 45 minutes of multiple choice test with 4 possible answers, 1 mark each, and then it has the 5 scenario based multiple choice questions, 1 from each domain that has been identified, and it's kind of 2 marks each. And then the overall grading is fail, pass, distinction for this component. The component 2 is a simulated observation where the learner has to do 2 tasks for 20 minutes each. They get a reading time for that task, 5 minutes each, total 10 minutes, and then a Q&A session following that simulated observation, fail, pass, distinction. Now, just to give you an overview of that simulated observation, we are currently working with Ofqual to see how best we can implement this, because there are challenges within that simulated observation in terms of recording. So if we carried out the observation, how a learner is going to do the recording and show us the recording elements of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So when we finally, it's in its final stages to kind of agree with the Ofqual, and hence our EPA support materials are kind of slightly delayed for this particular EPA, but it's not going to be very long because we have reached kind of some decisions this week only with them. And we will talk about that delivery later on as well. So again, it's a fail, pass, distinction, and the component 3 is a 30-minute professional discussion for the knowledge that has been identified specifically, and it is also fail, pass, distinction. So that's the kind of the components for the level 2 pharmacy. So pharmacy technician qualifications, again, we have got 2 different ones. And just to make you aware, I know I didn't say at the level 2, is when you look at our website, there's a drop-down menu that you need to clearly pick the right qualification for your learners. It's on the same page for level 2 and the same page for level 3, but there's a drop-down, so you need to pick the right qualification number and the right qualification specification that you're using. So although the level 2 has got all same 8 units, but you need to look at the structure correctly. And the level 3 has got the same 21 units for the on-program, but there is no difference in that. But the integrated apprenticeship includes the EPA components as well, EPA units. So the GLH for the non-apprenticeship version is 785, and it's got all of the 21 mandatory units. So there are 19 units at level 3 and 2 units at level 4. And most of the units are knowledge only. The units 3, 5, 7, 8, 9 are knowledge and skills combined. It's offered in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And like I said, it started in February 2020. The integrated apprenticeship, what this means is that the learners also need to cover the 2 additional units of the EPA. So it's got the 21 on program plus the 2 EPA units, which is the observations, and I'll talk about that in the next slide as well, and the professional discussion. And they need to achieve those. Without that, they can't achieve this qualification. So the learners must complete all 23 units, the 21 plus 2. So it's got the same units, knowledge and skills. This is only offered in England, and the operational start date for this one is September. It just started 2 days ago. So you can now register your learners on it. The components, as I said, there is no specific order for the pharmacy technician one. The professional discussion is the component 1, which is 90 minutes. Now, in the level 3, please note that reflective accounts and self-evaluation as an evidence cannot be included for level 3 EPA portfolio that supports the professional discussion. So it's again important for you to consider when you're producing the portfolio for on program, because reflective accounts will not be accepted, and that's in the assessment plan. So the grading is fail, pass, distinction. The component 2 is Q&A, which is 60-minute observation with Q&A, sorry. It's a 60-minute observation with specific tasks that needs to be observed on dispensing as well as person-centered care, and the 20 minutes Q&A. So it's a fail, pass. It's not fail, pass distinction on this one. So those are the two components. So how can you start planning, and what can you do to make sure that your learners are ready and learners are supported throughout the journey for these qualifications and endpoint assessments? So any qualification, anything, it needs to start even prior to enrollment. So you need to consider, you need to look at what are the requirements for this qualification. Have you got all the resources? Have you got all the staffing that's needed? Because there are very specific requirements that's not from us only, it's from GPHC. For example, I've put it here is in terms of delivery, staff delivering should be occupationally competent and registered with GPHC. So the staffing requirements are clearly identified in the annex in the specification. Again, employer engagement is a big part of this qualification, because you need to share clearly the expectations with employer. So for example, again, level 3 has got rotation might be required because they need to cover all areas. So employers need to start planning for rotation, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's stock, or whether it's dispensing. So they can't achieve the full qualification because all units are mandatory, so they need to cover all areas. There has to be a robust induction, because learner needs to be clear on what they need to achieve and how they're going to achieve. There needs to be, again, at that employer engagement in terms of that they need to have a support with the employers as well. So these are some of the things that we've identified that you need to start thinking even before. I know you've probably already done it, but I'm just highlighting these. At this point, I'm going to just pause for a moment and ask you, are there any things that you can share that you have done, in terms of planning, or are there any pain points? So it would be good to see if you can identify in the chat box, in the questions box, put some comments to say what have been your pain points when you've been planning, or what is there any other support that we can give you? So I have one comment that says that they've already timetabled the rotations, and learning outcomes paperwork for each rotation, so that the workplace supervisors are clearly know what they need to cover. So that's a good idea, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, absolutely. If you can timetable those right from the beginning is always helpful, and clearly tell the workplace supervisors so that they know what they need to cover in each of those rotations. Absolutely. Okay, another one. Yeah, useful when planning to identify the order in which the units are being taught. Okay, yeah. Just sometimes I can't see on this the whole message that's been written. It's really frustrating. It's about, I'm going to try and read. Okay, yeah, useful when planning to identify the order. Yeah, by taught. Okay.
Just while people are thinking, Raman, just
Yeah,
considering induction, because typically induction is with the learner, involving mentors, employers. So you're not only inducting the learner to the qualification, but you're also inducting the employer and mentor to your expectations as a training provider.
absolutely. That's a good point. Yeah, and again, I'm sure maybe some of you have done it, and I know in the past I have done it, maybe just have at the initial meeting with all the employers and provide, and again, using the technology now, a good webinar for everybody, and even if, what are their roles, what is the expectations that you have from them, so and what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, kind of telling them upfront, and even involving them, because they might have some challenges they might face. So yeah, inducting them through a webinar is definitely a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we'll carry on from here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, because I think it's important that you all, it's an opportunity for you to share here. If you think of anything else, please do carry on sharing in the chat box, in the question box with everyone. Okay, so something that I wanted to clearly highlight is that there are strict entry requirements, and these are again for level 3 specifically from GPHC criteria requirement point of view. So the learner needs to have definitely access to pharmacy environment. Now GPHC doesn't say it's specifically 14 hours, but I think that's what we have put it as a minimum that the learner should be able to achieve. But as an apprentice, there's a clear ESFA guidance that the apprentice should have minimum 30 hours. So at level 3, the GCSE or equivalent at at grade C or level 4 for English and maths and science, it's because you want a learner who's able to cope with that content and the level of that content, so that they don't struggle. And if they haven't got that, and you feel that they're not ready for it, then you need to consider that, because I think at the SV visit, we will be asking you, if the learner doesn't have that, how you're going to support. Now, we've been asked the questions about the requirements. You can have the equivalent requirements, definitely, that's not an issue. However, you need to consider how you're measuring that, because if there's an international learner, are you obtaining NARIC statements that they have that at the right level? Now, you can consider, for example, the science. We've been asked the question in terms of, can you use applied science? Now, again, is the learner able to cope with that applied science? Or if they've done an access to higher education courses with some sciences, they might have used just one science but not all the other sciences, and you know there's chemistry and biology heavy at level 3. So it's your decision, and if to make that, is our learner at that level, and are they able to cope with that, or if not, what support are you going to be providing to that learner? It's a requirement at level 3 that there is a character reference that is obtained, and there is a self-declaration of health and fitness to practice, because when they register with GPHC, the fitness to practice is a norm that they have to declare. Character reference can be obtained through different ways, and it's clearly identified in our specification that you can actually have either a DBS or a reference from school, or from or a college from wherever they've done the previous qualifications. So it doesn't have to be one or the both of them. So, and if you're doing the DBS, you don't need to necessarily hold that DBS, because that doesn't belong to you if a learner's getting that done. So you just need to kind of reference that for the SV to know that how you have checked the character reference, because there's an appendix at the end for you to do the declaration how you've done those checks in the specification. So these are the entry requirements, some of them that are important that I wanted to highlight. Again, at level 2, the access to pharmacy environment is absolutely a must, and the apprentices, that they must have a level 1 English and maths prior to completing that apprenticeship. So I would say that for the qualification as well, you would expect the same level that the learner must have, although we haven't made any recommendations or mandatory requirement for entry requirements. But I think that's what I would say, to balance it with the same level as apprentices, all the learners who are doing the qualification should have at that level. And again, although the good character reference and self-declaration is not a requirement at level 2, but I think if the learners you feel that are going to progress to level 3 and become registered practitioners and pharmacy technicians, I think it would be good to start thinking that at this stage, if you not get a character reference, and then if you want to move on to level 3 and their DBS kind of throws up something else, they can't progress. So it's better to check at level 2 as well. So it's just a recommendation for you to think about, for you to consider. So staffing and resource requirements for delivering these qualifications. Now, in our specifications, we have clearly identified in the center resource section as general resources that you have to have. So, and the staffing requirements in the annex of the appendix 2 of the assessment principles. So as an assessor, what qualifications they should have, and as an IQA, what qualifications they should have, and as a person who's just delivering or the person who is assessing what they need to clearly have. I can bring up the specification and just show you what that appendix look like. Hopefully everyone can see this specification. So just wanted to kind of point out some of the sections in here, and it's the same in the level 2 as well. So I'm just bringing up one. So in the center resource requirements in the general resources, it clearly identifies and it mentions that Annex A as well in the appendix. So what qualification requirements there are. So please make sure that you have looked through these, because these are the things that are monitored by the SVs. And for specific unit requirements, they are at the end of each unit. So just to be mindful of those. So let me just bring this up. I should have done it from the index rather than doing it this way. Apologies for that. So just wanted to bring up one of the units. So yeah, essential resources for the units for information for teachers for each unit is identified like that at the end of each unit. So just to be aware of that you need to look at, apart from the general resources, the specific resources as well. Okay. I'm just going to open it probably and be easier to do it that way. Just wanted to show you the Annex A, the things that I talked about, so I can. So the staffing requirements that I was mentioning are these. So anyone that's assessing competence must be GPAT registered and must hold or be working towards the appropriate assessor qualification and have experience, which is continuously demonstratable through CPD. So again, you should be able to evidence that and show it to your SVs, because that's kind of thing that you will be asked. So again, somebody who is assessing knowledge, again, the same as the role 1, or they must have qualifications and experience, which can be demonstrated through CPD. So staffing requirements are clearly identified for IQAs and for assessors and people those who are delivering. So these qualifications. So the overall sign off of the qualification must be done by somebody who's GPHC registered and understand the nature and context of the assessor's work, or who've assessed the knowledge and the skills. And so just to be aware of, so just wanted to point this out to you all. It's important. So going back to the presentation. And again, we talked about the employee resource, so it must be clearly identified right at the beginning that they have a dedicated mentor or supervisor who's GPHC registered and who understands the qualification as well. And again, we talked about the rotation for level 3 to make sure that there is access to all, achieve all the knowledge and skills. In terms of the approval requirements for if you haven't already got the approval, so if you were a Pearson Centre delivering the old BTEC and NVQ qualifications, if you were offering both and you meet all the conditions for auto approval, which is a kind of that you've been delivering those in the last 2 years, but if you haven't been delivering, and obviously there are no financial issues in terms of with your centre, then you would be auto approved for these qualifications. But if you have been offering only one of the qualifications and not both, the old BTEC and NVQ, you'll be required to complete the qualification approval and an additional approval document to gain the approval for these new qualifications. So this applies to both level 2 and level 3. And centres who are completely new to Pearson need to gain both the centre approval and the qualification approval. And you can talk to the work-based learning customer service teams who can support you with the approval if you haven't already achieved. So for centres who had achieved in February the level 3 qualification approval, have been automatically given the approval for the new level 2 qualifications and the other level 3, which is the integrated apprenticeship. So you should have already been able to register learners on those. And if you haven't, please talk to the customer service teams or your account managers, so they can support you, or you can raise queries through the CRM portal if you're already a centre. So in terms of registering learners, so what you need to do when you have the learners and you know that you want to now register for all the qualification side, obviously you need to do on the Edexcel online. But at the same time, we highly recommend that if you're doing apprenticeships, that you also register those learners on ACE 360. And if you haven't been onboarded, again, you talk to your account managers. So you register your apprentices on ACE 360. The reason for this is that because that helps us with the resource planning for endpoint assessments. So we know that if you've got 20 apprentices starting now for level 2, in a year's time, they will be ready for the apprenticeship. So we can start that resource planning now. And at the same time, so that we can do that. And the same for level 3, we know in 21 months or 24 months time the learner might be ready, so we need to be planning for that. So we can only request you, but I think it'd be helpful for you as well to start planning, because then you can also see on the system, and Andy will go through, is where the learner is in the journey as well. I'm just going to pause for a minute because I've been asked a question and I feel that it's important that I answer that question right now. So a question that has been asked is about college science tutor can deliver the science units. And again, yes, they can, as far as the assessment and overall the IV has happened, IQA has happened, and sign off of that unit has happened by somebody who is GPHC registered. So that was an important question and that I felt it needed answering. So the answer is yes, because we've been asked this question before. So the answer is yes, as far as that can be done. So moving on, learner registrations we've talked about, and then it's what can you do to support the delivery, because this delivery will be happening in terms of for both learners on apprenticeships and non-apprenticeships, probably at the same time sometimes in a centre. We appreciate that. So again, what you need to think about is we have provided you the mapping for the on-programme units to the apprenticeship standard. So you know where the evidence can come from the on-programme units for if you're doing the apprenticeships and the non-apprenticeships at the same time. For example, the level 2, there is a test for the apprentices. So we have not put any different content for the level 2 for the apprenticeship or the non-apprenticeship separately. All the things that are going to be tested in the apprenticeships level 2 is already included in the content in the teaching for the both qualifications is the same. There will be no additional content. So if you look at the content in the additional resources that we provide you, it's the same as what's already in the qualification. So there won't be any kind of any surprises for you when you come to look at that content. So you need to consider that that everything is covered. Again, thinking like professional discussions. So yes, there are written assignments that learners can do, but at the same time, because you know at the endpoint assessment, they need to do a professional discussion. So some of the elements you can consider using professional discussion, and get the learners prepared for that applied knowledge for both on program. So when you're looking at the professional discussion, look at the criteria for the qualification as well as the endpoint assessment criteria as well. So it's important that you're preparing the learner. So unfortunately, as I said, for the level 3, the standard was written kind of after the qualification was written, and for the level 2 the standard was written way before, so we have tried to integrate the similar criteria which is in the apprenticeship standards, so there are less of the surprises in that. But for level 3, because it was written after, there might be slightly different. So you need to consider the EPA criteria as well as the on-program criteria if you're preparing learners for professional discussions. And the same way, you need to consider the opportunities for the skill-based units for both qualifications. So the learners' observations are done on not just the on-program bit, also the EPA observation criteria as well, so that the learners are prepared. Because when we are focusing on qualification, when it is mandated, like in level 3, we focus on the qualification. We can only recommend that you look both alongside, and you can look at, are they also achieving that? So you can use almost the observations as mock each time you're doing that observation for the on-program. And this avoids the dilution of any criteria. So you are looking at, you need to focus on both, as I said. So don't look at only the one and not the other, or think, oh, they've achieved that, so they must have achieved the EPA criteria as well, and that may not be true. So, or if they've done this, it's partly achieved, so they would be able to. So try not to dilute that. That's what I mean. So they must achieve the full criteria for the EPA, otherwise, and that, as I said, may not fully map to the observation criteria and the qualification. So look at both. So just pointing out how it's laid out in the specification, the unit structures. So unit structure at level 2 is slightly different to the unit structure at level 3. So here the learning outcome assessment criteria is written on one page and the content is written separately. But again, we've used the same principles. Where it's emboldened is the content, and that all of that content must be taught. And then there is assessment guidance that's separately. So the assessment guidance is clearly written around each criteria, how the learner can achieve that criteria. And for level 3, as I said, it's laid out all on one page. Again, the emboldened elements are same in the content, and that must be taught. And the assessment guidance is written separately. So assessment principles, this is the important bit that you need to be aware of both at level 2 and level 3, although it's the similar assessment principles that have been applied at both levels, so there's not that many differences in those. So for knowledge-based units, and this is the Annex A in the specification, you can use internally set, internally marked assignments. Like I said, assessment guidance is there in each unit. We have provided the assignment briefs for level 3, and we are looking into whether we can provide you for level 2, and we're doing our best to make sure that we can, but I can't promise at this stage. The learners, again, will be given a maximum of 4 weeks to complete each assignment. Maximum of 2 further opportunities can be given to retake each of the assessment if they have failed on the first attempt. And retakes should be submitted within 2 weeks. So these are some of the criteria in our assessment principles. And units are only pass or fail, so they're not graded. So like it was in the old BTEC for the pharmaceutical sciences. For skills-based units, as always, the skills for health principles are very clear. The primary method is the observation. And for both of the qualifications, across the qualification, we're only asking for minimum of 3 observations that cover the required skills. So it's 3 across the qualification, not 3 per unit. You can use more by all means, but the minimum that is required is 3, as it's been agreed with Skills for Health and the other AOs and GPHC as well. Alternative method of assessments can be used only where the primary method cannot be done. Simulations can be used, but they are applied to specific criteria. So you need to look at the guidance, because in only certain units and certain criteria, we have said where simulations can be used. Again, like I said, reflective accounts can be used for on-program if you're doing only qualifications, but if you're doing an apprenticeship and you want to use those, they can't be then used for supporting evidence for that professional discussion in a portfolio. there, because that is not allowed in level 3 endpoint assessment. So just to make you aware of that. Again, I've just put it here because it's important that we I'm not going to go through this, but it's important that what each of the verbs mean and how much detail is required if it's an assignment or if it's even in a professional discussion. If you're asking somebody to explain, for example, they need to give details of what you're asking, giving reasons, justifying, giving examples from their practice, and also relating it to the evidence to support that argument. And that is the same expectation at the endpoint assessment. If we're expecting somebody to explain, we would be expecting them to give that detail, use the evidence in their portfolio to support that argument, and say, this is what was done and this is why I've, anything that I'm explaining. So I've just put some of the verbs there just to help and support that what we expect in those verbs, because these are all used in the specification. So what resources are there for the qualification? There are links on here, so I'm not going to go through necessarily, but there are recorded webinars that were done for level 3 at the launch in February. So again, there are lots of principles in there that apply to level 2 as well. So by all means, listen to those, and it's important that you will be able to gain something out of it. There are assignment briefs, as I said, for all 21 units of the level 3. There is CRM support, so you can there are links here how you can access the CRM support, the customer service support. Obviously, you can contact your SSV if you've been allocated the SV and the SSVs, and the SSV for these qualifications is Andrew Mould. There are newsletters that come out each month for any of the updates, and also any of the updates that GPHC sent us as well come in these newsletters. So if you haven't already signed up for these newsletters, there's a link here. When you get this presentation, please make sure that you do sign up for these newsletters. The last but not the least thing is that if you do not want to if you want to opt in for all of these updates, for anything, for the quality nominees, for the exam officers, for these newsletters, on the CRM in your account, you need to make sure that you have opted in, otherwise you will not get it. So please contact your exam officers if you don't have the CRM access. I'm sure you do have, but if you don't, so you do, and then you tick that box for opt-in to make sure that you get all these updates or any of the marketing updates. We've also produced a flyer that you can use even with the, which we will share. It's going to be launched very soon, is for our full offer, so you can even use it in your open days and things, that what's the pharmacy offer. So we'll share that with you very soon in one of these updates. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the authorized assignment briefs. Obviously we have provided you, and if we do end up providing for level 2 as well, so you can use them as it is, you can adopt them, or you can adapt them, or you can create your own. I've already put it that learners will get 4 weeks to complete each assignment, and if they don't, they get only 2 weeks for the further attempts. But if you're designing your own assignment briefs, there are a few things that you need to consider. So the number of assignments for a unit ideally should not exceed the number of learning outcomes in that unit, or you can do a whole assignment brief for the whole unit if you want to. You may choose to combine different units into a single assignment as well if you want to, because if there is any application there anywhere. However, it's not ideally recommended. But it's for a learner point of view, and I'm pretty sure from your point of view as well, if it's kept separate at unit level, it's always best. But again, if there is a synopticity somewhere within the units, you can do that. And you need to make sure that the learners are fully prepared before introducing the assignment, so they are ready to provide that required evidence for the assessment, and you're able to track the achievement. A learning outcome must always be assessed as a whole if possible, but there are certain learning outcomes at both level 2 and level 3 where there is knowledge and skills both in the same learning outcome as assessment criteria. So you might want to split those assignments, so all the knowledge comes in one assignment and all the skills bit comes in the different assignment. So if there is a learning outcome that contains both knowledge and skills, it's okay to split, but ideally you should keep the learning outcome as a whole. So quality assurance, what happens? So standard verification visit encompasses certain additional requirements which GPHC want us to monitor, and it includes these domains: the selection and entry requirement, equality, diversity and inclusion, what kind of management structures there are and the resources and the capacity at the center, how you monitor and review and evaluate your courses, how you design and deliver, and how you assess the courses. So again, like I said, the GPHC standards must be part of all the courses. So you need to make sure there are guidance requirements on tutoring pharmacy technicians. So you need to make sure you've incorporated that guidance in when you're delivering these courses. And employer engagement is a big part. The course providers are required, as we are, to get the views of all the range of stakeholders when you're designing and delivering the courses. So your employers that you're working with, at the end of the course, you need to gain some feedback, and I'm pretty sure you already do that on and get the views to maybe plan for the next year. How you monitor and review those courses to take into the external environment like pharmacy. So again, it's about, if the pharmacy world is changing, if the pharmacy sector or the pharmacy environment is changing, how they dispense the medication in a pharmacy, then that course delivery needs to change. And also, we would be asking you for that same feedback, and we would be asking stakeholders as well, so that we can make sure that our courses are up to date and fit for the future as well. And again, all course providers and employers must have procedures to deal with these concerns, and any serious concerns that affect the pre-registration pharmacy technicians at level 3 must be reported to GPHC. So that is a requirement by you as well as us. So I'm pretty sure all the people that are delivering this are GPHC registered professionals, and this is part of their registration as well, to raise serious concerns with the GPHC. So that should automatically happen. Again, patient safety come first, so we need to make sure that the assessment strategy is about practicing safely as a trainee, and also trying to do things like, consent must be obtained when you're doing observations and things like that. And again, patient data is secure as well, so all of these things need to be considered. There must be clear procedures, again, as I said, for the learners to raise. This is one of the important things GPHC highlight, is learners must be taught how to raise concern, because as a pharmacy technician at level 3 specifically, but I would say that also applies to level 2, is that they need to learn how to raise any concerns, and then how it's dealt with, and it should be how it's documented and what actions are taken. Again, there's a clear guidance provided by GPHC on raising concerns. So pharmacy technicians, as they're regulated, they need to be taught that, and they need to be signposted to that guidance as well. Again, centres will have 2 SV visits per year, and they would review the standards, all of those, as it's a hybrid qualification. So for integrated pharmacy technicians, I just want to point out that when the learner reaches the gateway, that sampling of that on program elements should have already happened, because you would be required to claim the summary of results prior to gateway, because that's one of the evidence that is required. So the learners must have completed all the units, sampling must have happened, because there'll be no direct claims for this integrated pharmacy technicians. So you can't claim those 21 units automatically and then produce the 21 certificates as a, so you will only be able to get the summary of results, and that can only happen when the SV has cleared that your centre to do that. So that sampling of those apprentices must have happened for that reason. So in addition to the normal SV process that kind of happens, there is an additional SV kind of, like I mentioned, the domain. So I wanted to kind of show you quickly what kind of things, it's not to be kind of hung up about, but just to be aware of that this is the additional SV sampler in the domain. So I'm just going to point out a few things, hopefully you can see, is things like entry requirements. So SV would be asking you for the evidence of how you've checked the entry requirements, and have you secured pharmacy placement. So where's your agreement with that pharmacy, that how many hours they work and how they'll be rotated. So all of the things should be in the in your employer agreement, learner agreement, or the three-way agreement, or whatever you have. So these things would provide the evidence for the SV. And if I pick up another domain, is things like the resources and capacity. So your schedule of roles and responsibilities and who's accountable, your organizational structure, who will be delivering, who will be assessing, who will be IQAing, you know, and again, you probably already provide this for SVs, the CVs of the people those are involved in delivering the course to make sure that, and how they maintain their CPD, and to maintain that registration as well. And then it's things like how you involve the employers in course design and delivery, and how you make sure that the learner, the course is actually designed and delivered to meet those skills, knowledge and understanding, and the professional behaviors that are also included in the apprenticeship standards or by the GPHC as well. So these are some of the things that the SVs would be asking you for, in addition to the normal SV things that we do, because GPHC is a criteria clearly identified that these things by all the AOs need to be monitored. So I'm sure there is no surprises, but I think because these are all the things that are already in the qualification specification as criteria as well, that you will need to be just aware of and provide the evidence for. And again, your SVs will go through this on the first visit as well. So it's not that, as I said, not there's something to be hung up about, but I wanted to kind of highlight these. Okay, so moving on. I'll now hand over to you, to Andrew, to go through about the EPA. So Andy, can I hand over the
Yep, it should be
control?
done now.
Okay.
So you should be able to see the EPA journey screen. Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. Okay, so thanks, Raman. So I'm going to be taking you through the endpoint assessment journey, both at the level 2 and level 3 standard. So as Raman mentioned earlier on, for the pharmacy services assistant, so the level 2 EPA, we've got the 3 assessment components. So we've got the knowledge test, the simulated observation, and the professional discussion. As Raman did say, the knowledge test is multiple choice of 40 questions and 5 scenario-based multiple choice questions which pick up areas within each of the individual domains. Simulated observation I'm going to go into in a bit more detail on the next slide, but it's a maximum of 1 hour, which is inclusive of the question and answers, and there are 2 specific tasks which must be observed. Now, within the professional discussion, the assessment time is 30 minutes. However, independent endpoint assessors do have a 10% tolerance. So if an apprentice is at 30 minutes and they are in full flow, independent endpoint assessors won't finish the assessment on 30 minutes. They will allow the apprentice to finish around 32-33 minutes. The key thing to bear in mind with independent endpoint assessments is apprentices are familiar with their evidence, particularly within their portfolio, because that is what informs the professional discussion and the responses that the apprentice needs to provide. It's important to remember as well to prepare apprentices for professional discussion using words such as I. Now, we all say it, we all work collaboratively, we all work as a team, and it's human nature that we say, we did this. In endpoint assessment world, we've got to be able to assess the apprentice's own knowledge, skills and behaviours. So by encouraging apprentices to respond in a way of I did this, this will support them in their assessment. So when we're talking about the simulated observation, we will be providing a brief to the apprentice which encompasses the required knowledge, skills and behaviours. There are the specific activities, dispensing and supply of medicines, and also working within standard operating procedures, legal and ethical frameworks. Now, within our guidance documents, within our specifications and resource packs, we are indicating that real livestock should be used, and the reason for that is to ensure compliance with any internal audit trails. We're encouraging 10 prescriptions to be kept to one side, covering 3 different items, which will allow the independent endpoint assessor to choose and observe the apprentice. Raman mentioned earlier on in the presentation that we are in discussions with Ofqual around this assessment component to make sure that apprentices do have access to fair and equitable assessment practice. So once we receive the final green light, as it were, from Ofqual and the Trailblazer Group, that will be well documented within our resource materials. Looking now at the integrated apprenticeship, so we've got the 2 components, the professional discussion for an hour and a half and the observation. Within the professional discussion, we have produced a portfolio guidance document and an evidence mapping grid. Now, the reason we've produced these documents is to support the apprentice in selecting appropriate evidence to help them within this component. Again, reflections and self-evaluations can't be included as evidence. This line has been taken directly from the assessment plan, and typically 30 pieces of evidence will be required. Apprentices are allowed to take notes in, but this will be limited to 2 sheets of A4 paper. The reason we've put a limit on the notes is in previous endpoint assessments, we have had apprentices who have brought reams and reams of notes, pointers, and it's too much for the apprentice to listen to the independent endpoint assessor asking the question to then find the correct section of their notes. And also, in previous experience, it's turned into a sort of a reading assessment. What we are looking for, particularly in the professional discussion, is has that apprentice got the confidence to verbalise their skills, their knowledge and behaviours. So that's the reason we've put a clear, definitive 2 sheets of A4 within the resource pack and specification. Within the observation, we've got a question and answer. It's a 60-minute direct observation and then 20 minutes question and answers. And like Raman said, the focus is around dispensing of medicines and the delivery of person-centred care. So within the spec for the integrated apprenticeship, there is clear detail on what the apprentice will be expected to demonstrate during this assessment activity.